I talk to the IT people. There are certain permissions with YouTube's vis-a-vis the university that I don't really understand how to bypass or correct. They said the best thing for me to do is, what I do is I create the YouTubes for each class most of the time, assuming that the recording works and comes through. And then I just change it over to a YouTube, and I embed it. Now I can do that. I appear successfully and not have to worry about anything else. And it's easier for me. Why I like the YouTubes is I can look at my files of all of those and get them to you in case somebody mislays one, or I can find them fairly easily and send them to you again if necessary. So that's the way I like to do it. I hope it helps. If you don't want to listen to them, don't, but I think you should. Nevertheless, we have a special today. Now you've all had lab. What fun. So you're learning, and look what I have for you at no extra charge. That's right. Today, free. I have outlined for you a chapter I don't even do, but I've outlined it 20 years ago. It doesn't count. I'm just making a big deal. And it's from a different textbook, but lining cells haven't changed. That whole simple stratified, columnar, where you find them, what the heck they do, all the different holocrin. You didn't get to that yet. Apocrine, holocrin, not ringing a bell. Oh, you may not have all the stuff. Connective tissues. The whole chapter for you at no extra charge. And yes, that's right. If you order today, you get another one. Believe it or not, you get skin. That's right. We'll even be doing skin here, but you can use this for lab. And all you have to do is three simple, no, don't have to tell them about the payments. It's like we're on the shopping network. I do that routine all the time. Was that okay? Did that get like a semi up? Okay. You probably guys can see now why my wife likes it, even at my advanced age while I go to work. I get away from her. Nevertheless, we should be getting now after that modest and less than impressive start. For those of you who don't like the jokes, who cares? Okay, here we go. We are finally at homeostasis. And there's very little left in this chapter, and we're going to get to the next chapter. And good news, the periodic table has come in. Now we have to figure out a way to put it on the wall or wherever we're going to use it. It's big. Came in this morning. Thank you very much. Or whenever it got delivered. Nevertheless, okay. Homeostasis is really, and all it is, to understand it, is we all have set points. Or they by and large are the same, and by and large they differ infinitesimally. So maybe my normal isn't 98.6, or remember we're in science, we have to say 37 degrees Celsius. Okay, maybe my blood pressure is 135 over 78, and maybe yours is good old 120 over 80, and a lot of times it's like my wife's is 110 over 60. There's different set points for different people, body types, age, hereditary factors, lifestyle factors, all of those things play a role. Okay? Different medications you may or may not take, all of that plays a role in it. But around that, effectively, we have a variety of what you would call control centers. They're typically part of one of two systems that we will get to, either the nervous system or the endocrine system. Those are our control systems. Quick fix. You don't get the endocrine until next week. Obviously, you're going to talk about it. The big deal is if we have to make rapid adjustments, nervous system. If we have to make longer term adjustments, a lot of times it's endocrine system. And oftentimes when we make that rapid adjustment by the nervous system, the endocrine system then kicks in afterwards to either prolong it, modify it, et cetera, et cetera. And when I say quick, your nervous system, bang, right away. Endocrine can be seconds, minutes, hours, days, et cetera. It can be long. So fast versus fast may not seem like in seconds is endocrine sometimes. It's like when you get an adrenaline rush from doing something. That's the endocrine system kicking in, even though the nervous system responded much more quickly. And we'll get to nervous system a lot in this particular chapter. So those are the control centers. And we have receptors are just sensors. We're filled with them inside and out. They have fancy names when we get to them. You have external receptors. They're called exteroreceptors, internal, interoreceptors. Who cares? But we have different variations of them, light receptors like for your eyes, pressure receptors or mechanical receptors for hearing, all that. And we'll talk about all of those, but they all are receptors, and it's a relatively simple circuit. An impulse of something triggers a receptor, like you should be hearing the sound of my voice or hearing, the HVAC system doing whatever it should be doing or not. And then that goes to wherever the control center is, and a response is necessary. I'm sure by the afternoon I'll take off the sweater. Okay, I will. Right? Most likely. So there it is. Detects and provides information, whatever that stimulus is. And stimulus does not mean that you have to necessarily respond to it. Muscle or gland that responds, the control center is the effector, how we basically enable the change. And it could be internal or external. And that's all that is, one of these neat diagrams. Nothing to it. The big deal is how we do it. Most of the time, the vast, vast, vast majority of times, with rare exceptions, so remember the exceptions, negative feedback. Negative feedback means we're making subtle, they call it negative, and they explain it pretty well here, okay? Negative because the response to the change moves the variable in the opposite direction of its deviation. So if your temperature is going up, it brings it back down. If your temperature is going down, it brings it back up by a variety of different means. If your degree of hydration will change, it may bring your sodium levels up or down to a particular thing. There's little things like that that occur. Sugar, the same way. Calcium, the same way. Basically everything. So if you had, like I just had a cough drop and I had sugar in it, that's going to raise my sugar. Immediately, my body's going to release insulin. It's going to, since I'm not a diabetic and I have the capability of releasing insulin, it's going to start to lower it back down to the point. If it overshoots a little bit at the same time, you're going to learn about this in AP2, my body's going to release by almost a similar circuit something called glucagon. It's going to raise it back up. That's the beauty of understanding sugar metabolism, diabetes. There's several factors, and when they get out of whack, that's what diabetes is. It's more complex than just high blood sugar. And I'll say it to all the classes, so I might as well get it out of the way now. Any of you going into a healthcare field, with rare exceptions, and particularly nursing, the disease you need to know the most about, diabetes. Period. End of sentence. I mean, in rare exceptions, if you're going to do strictly pediatrics or neonatology, fine. Maybe you don't have to know it. But anything else, standard med surg, gerontology, maybe psych nursing, you don't have to do. What contribution? But the simple diagnosis, the simple factor is that is the most common diagnosis. Think of them. Diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, high blood pressure. That's what people have. It behooves you to know the most about it. That's what you know. How frequently you're going to see somebody with ankylosing spondylitis is relatively rare. Sjogren's syndrome, relatively rare. Those are autoimmune diseases. I mean, a very famous person has Sjogren's syndrome. She's playing tennis right now, won in doubles last night, Venus Williams. Still going pretty good at 45 years old. Mark. So, I mean, understand it's kind of, and I say this all the time, you have to learn the diseases that are going to affect people the most, or the conditions, depending on what field you're going into. If you're going to physical therapy, sure, you have to learn about knees and learn a lot about them. And if you're going to be where there's medicines involved, a la nursing, a la physician's assistants, a la anything like that, learn the medicines that you use most frequently. Okay, those are the ones you have to understand. How many people, I take a medicine called amlodipine, used to be called Norvasc. I know how many people with high blood pressure take that medicine. They all take it. Top 5 prescribed medicines, top 10, those are the ones you got to know. Not just what their names are, what they do, what the doses are, what the side effects, what the problems what happens if there's a problem with it. That's the way if you frame your learning that way, things that you encounter the most, know the most about. The things that you encounter rarely or occasionally, or because you're having a lecture about it, you do what everybody else does. You look them up. We all do that. Moving on. Nevertheless, so it's really well explained. These are changes that are taking it away from where it's going, maybe where it shouldn't, where it's going irregularly. That's why they call it negative feedback. So, and it prevents sudden severe change. When things happen suddenly, there's big problems. Imagine someone's in a terrible accident, ruptures an organ inside, bleeding internally. The clock's ticking. You don't do something fast, they're going to die. So, temperature, blood pressure, glucose, all the ones I mentioned. When we get to bone, we'll talk about calcium. Bone is one of its major roles is as basically a storage bank for calcium, which we use all the time in unbelievable amounts. Muscles need it, nerves need it, blood clotting needs it, the heart needs it. All of those things are there for calcium. So it's an elegant set of controls. If we need more, we take it out of the bone. If we have some extras, we put it back into the bone. It's like having a savings account. Oh, I got to take some out to spend it. I have extra. I'm going to put it back in. Not a whole lot like that. They have a whole bunch of these things. If you get something out of that, whatever. Illustrations like that they stuff a lot of stuff into an illustration. I don't know about you. I can't stand it. You see them in A&P all the time. They got all the names of, well, maybe you did it with Dr. Robbins. All the names of, you have the scapular area, you have the acromial area, the clavicular area, the frontal, backal, occipital, temporal, all that type of stuff. And when you see a diagram, it's got every freaking name on it in the world. Those are hard to deal with. There's something to be said for that. Remember the exceptions. The two major exceptions are right here. What they do is effectively, rather than bring it back to the set point, it just goes crazy. We call it self-amplifying. The response gets bigger. When your blood starts to clot, more and more clotting factors are activated, more and more chemicals, and it creates a cascading type of reaction until such time as those chemicals are no longer available, and that means your blood is clotted. Hopefully where it's supposed to be. If there's problems in that particular system, particularly internally, now we're dealing with blood clot problems. That's a whole other, and we don't even really cover that. We cover that in some degree of detail, depending on who's teaching you in AP2. It's something you get into more as time goes on. So it's relatively uncommon. We intensify it. Okay. So it's relatively quickly done. Like your blood clots pretty easily with a regular cut. There's an old saying, pressure stops all bleeding, just wham. Like that, get something to put on top of it, paper towel, whatever you have, tissue, whatever you have handy, and just hold that bad boy. 5 to 10 minutes with firm pressure. 5 to 10 minutes by the clock is a lot longer than you think. Try it sometime. Say, I'm going to put pressure on this and not move my hand for 5 minutes, and don't look. And when you think 5 minutes up, go look at, a stopwatch or whatever you're using it. Okay, and then you'll see it's like 2 minutes. You've only done it for. Time goes a lot slower than you would think. So they seem like they will not lead to homeostasis, but they will. And the other is childbirth. Normally when you stretch a muscle, if you stretch a muscle and it's one of the hollow tubes in your body, it responds reflexly. Or if you stretch a muscle here, it responds reflexly. Think of a knee jerk or something along those lines. You're basically creating a stretch and a sensor and responds reflexly by contracting. So if anything, as the baby starts to be delivered, it will be pushed back. Here, we make the contraction so intense the baby is eventually pushed forward until the act of completion. And so the continual release of the chemical that you'll come to know is called oxytocin, which is made genetically. It's a relatively simple 9 amino acids. We'll learn about some of those things here. It's basically called pitocin. That's the distinction. One is naturally occurring, the other one is available for injection and is used to induce labor when appropriate. Okay? And so those are the two, and you're going to see down the road in female repro, when you get to the end of AP2, you see some other ones that are sort of interesting variants, like the onset of menstruation, for instance. And they'll show you that, and they always use the same thing. This is a very useful diagram. Basically, it's what the body's construct is. What we're saying is the bloodstream interconnects all vital structures. Obviously, I haven't put them all on here. The digestive system or alimentary canal is basically a tube that goes through you. When you eat something or you drink something, it's basically traversing the interior. It's lined, so it's not technically within your tissues. It is not a sterile environment, by the way. That's one of the problems when somebody ruptures a bowel or other hollow organs. If there's like an ovarian rupture or a tubal rupture, now you're letting contents that are not sterile, quote unquote, get into a sterile confine, the abdominal pelvic cavity. We have a word for that, peritonitis. It's like a ruptured appendix. Now all that nasty bacteria, which are just, the colon is just unbelievably filled with it, and it's your friends as long as it's there. But the lining prevents it. As long as it's in that tube, it's not in your body per se. So it's going through, and we take the stuff in and we absorb. Typically in the bloodstream, there's something else called lymphatics it gets absorbed in. And it makes its way around. And they don't have the liver on here that they should, because there's so much processing that it does, but you get to that as well. And the heart's there pumping it and distributing it. And indeed, integral to that process is to provide enough energy and get rid of waste products. That's where the lung. So the two, that's why we call it CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Because you can pump on that chest, but if you don't have a competent airway, that whole ABC thing, unless they changed it dramatically, I haven't upped in CPR in 25 years. But some of the nuances have changed. But, there's been some, effectively, if you don't have an airway, however you get that, it's not something that's not so easy. That's one of the problems. That's there. So all that's part of it. And then we're not done yet with getting rid of waste products and making sure the blood has a proper consistency, proper chemical balance, proper nutrient balance, with things like acidity and alkalinity, good old pH. And that's where the kidneys come in. So they're part of this. And what happens when one of these, and that's why it's so useful, when one of these structures is impacted, all of these structures are. They're intertwined. That's the beauty of the body and the curse of the body. When one of them goes, we start to see that. With elderly folks, a lot of times, and was the first patient who I had, who I began to know, and then a few months later, after I had seen her for something absolutely unrelated to, I hear that she has died. I called her family doctor, who referred to me. I said, "What's up?" He goes, "Multi-system failure." What happens is folks get older, systems start to break down. One breakdown, it puts stress on the other one. It starts to break down, and all of a sudden, multi-system. So that's it. This is lab. So we're pretty much done with this stuff. All I would ask you to do, go through all the viscerals and parietals and peritoneum, and I've done all this stuff. If you have questions about it, I'm happy to answer for you. I mean, all of those things, parietal, visceral, all those wonderful body cavities, the quadrants, all good stuff. Okay. Then 1,000, take a look at the systems. See what's involved in each one. Take a look at the diagrams if that assists you. I don't get a lot out of those particular diagrams. They're pretty straightforward. And there's a very useful chart at the end of this. Getting here. I mean, things like that, what's involved, what their roles are. Know a few of the structures that are in it, so you have an idea. So it's a trigger point. You'll know that liver is part of digestive system. And these are when I say by definition, this is anatomically important. Why? I'm unfamiliar with all of the questions that you might be asked on standardized exams. There's always going to be something that's relatively straightforward. It's rare on a standardized exam that they take, and I'm speaking like with the NCLEX or something similar to it, or licensure exams, that they're going to give you a very complicated point out of a particular system or area. It's all about generating basic understanding, other than perhaps in your field. So there'll be more, like in nursing, there'll be more nursing specific things. In physical therapy, there'll be more physical therapy specific things. I can't envision that. And there's a degree of complication. My first wife to this day still has no idea how she passed. They used to post the grades then. You've got numeric grading. On the psych section of I'm sure they didn't call it the NCLEX. This is we're talking like 1972, it's not 50 plus years ago. She had a 75, that was the passing grade. She goes, I still don't know how to pass the thing. It's funny, it still said RN eventually. And later she went to Slippery Rock when they started the BSN program there. They weren't that common. They had a 2+2 problem. Just my wife texting something. I think that's a good thought. I had thought about that. I'll respond to that. They had a 2+2 problem, and she went back 10 years after she had been, and he had a lot of practical experience and did it much, much better. Became really very good because she learned about how to study. She learned she was very much of an auditory learner. And then back in the day, that's why I record these things to a certain extent. She learned that if I'll take notes in class and now I'll go back and listen to the recording, and then I'll look at my notes and revisit them or maybe take additional notes and compare them. And it was a lot of work. But at that time we didn't have any kids, so it was not that terribly difficult. So just some of this information, and that's everything. Why do I have to go to this slide? Very upsetting. That part. I used to reserve this and do this at the end because I generally don't do AP2. But I suppose I should mention it to you for the sake of completeness. I think it's unlikely that I would put something on an exam for this because it bothers me even to look at it. This is an opportunity to laugh. Okay? None of you do that. You know, my Wednesday afternoon class at least laughed occasionally. But they were stuck with me for 2.5 hours. They knew better. Okay. These are standard aging things. What happens? And you'll see it when you do individual systems. This is what happens. We know about hair changes, either hair absence. We don't say that word. Commonly beginning with a B. Okay. Becomes gray or white. Okay. Again, loss of subcutaneous fat is something that is there. It doesn't manifest itself as weight loss commonly, because we talk about wrinkling and things like that. And obviously today people do. It's your choice to do what you want as you get older. But it's a slippery slope when you start using Botox and those kinds of injections. You got to keep using them. So using them early is something that becomes that type of stuff. And yeah, the skin becomes much less elastic. The overall, why it doesn't reflect as weight loss, it's almost as though the fatty material redistributes that are there. One of those diagnoses I told you, arthritis. You don't have to worry about it. About 85% of the people, by the time they get about 70 years old, have arthritis. It's called osteoarthritis. It's wear and tear. Sports injuries play a significant role in that. And it doesn't have to be competitive sports. When you get an injury in a sport, it's depending if there's bleeding into the joint, it's going to undergo arthritic changes. It will. Post-traumatic arthritis is a variation. And some people are more susceptible to it than others. There's no way to avoid it. So those are some of the things that go along with it. Blood pressure, we see a lot more of. Mine, probably hereditary based. Okay, thankfully controlled fairly easily. We see a lot of progression in people. One of the biggest single problems we face today is the increasing amount of type 2 diabetes. We used to call that maturity onset. There was juvenile and there was maturity onset. And I don't want to get into all the discussions. Diabetes, we could do a course in and of itself easily for 2 semesters. That's how complicated it is. But the big problem today that we're seeing in young folks your age and younger is the development of this because of lack of activity. We're sitting there in front of those, we're gaming in front of those things. I'm not saying, I don't want to make what things are right or wrong and say everybody's susceptible to it, but there's a increased degree of inactivity and sedentariness. And diet ain't so great either, particularly in this country. So believe me, I'm the worst candidate. I didn't see the inside of the gym until I was 55 years old. And my first wife said, "You're going." And I knew exactly how to tell her how to respond to that command. Yes, dear. Again, it's the way it works. And it's helped me tremendously. One thing about having a lot of arthritis, keeping it moving. So those are all things. What do we do? How do we able to predict if someone might be on their way to type 2 diabetes or to any diabetes? Now it's not just sticking your finger with blood tests. So that's a good part of it. There's another blood test that you have to get and send away. What is it? Anybody hear about it? It's called hemoglobin A1C. On TV, you hear all that stuff. All those Giardia commercials, people are dancing around, all that type of stuff. Good for them. At least they're doing something. But the A1C, it stands for glycosylated hemoglobin. And so glycosylation is, think of it as sugar that has bonded to hemoglobin, which is, there's always going to be some. But the more there is, the greater the problem. And so if your A1C is now, I think now over 5.9, you go into that realm of pre-diabetes, pushing diabetes. And a lot of it's diet. My eldest will be running the Marine Corps Marathon. So we're talking about fitness. He's a career military officer. So he's very fit, can run, yet his A1C is up. Now, I understand all my children are adopted, so he doesn't have a hereditary answer as to why, what role that plays. It's certainly not that. His affection for bourbon may be part of it. Just saying. He has a bourbon collection. He's one of those, people with bourbon collections like that, which he can't take with him in his next assignment. Next August, he's going to be assigned for 2 years to Bahrain. Can't bring alcohol in. So basically, I told him you have till August to drink it, and I said, and obviously if you want us to store it, we'll let it store. We really don't. Very, very rarely. So tissues get smaller. These are called telomeres. You may have heard about them. This is one. When I do a presentation like this is not a bunch of. I'm not going to test you on this. I'm doing this for contextual information, and so it's for the sake of completeness that I covered that. Because I don't know if it will be, a lot of the stuff you're not going to get from every instructor. So I'm trying to get this stuff in. Metabolic rate, decreased enzymes, and yeah, unfortunately, not everybody succumbs. And not everybody succumbs early. My mom didn't start to really demonstrate. My mom was driving until 86. My mom really didn't start to demonstrate Alzheimer's signs until she was almost 90. She lived to be 93. Okay. Her mom was the same way. In the days before you even explain that, my grandmother, my mom's mom, was very cogent until she was 92 years old. It was more physical limitations, not Alzheimer's. So it's surprising. And my former father-in-law, unfortunately, probably before he was 70, really, you started to see significant. He had to stop driving and things like that. Wonderful, wonderful man. He was 80 by the time he succumbed. And that's everything. I'm getting tired of this. We'll get out of it. Start the next chapter. Now, I would love to have had the periodic table, but I didn't. But we have enough time to do a basic introduction. You saw me, maybe if you were watching, Paige sort of go through these things. Because I haven't used this particular PowerPoint as much. And you saw me load it. Good opportunity. Just to pop up there and take a look at, where are you going? Lost you. You can't see anything unless you do this stuff. Here we go. Here, I loaded these chapter 2 and these chapter 2E, B, A, and B are to me are going to be supplemental for us as we look at the chapter in your textbook. This is from our previous textbook, and I try to marry the two, so I put them on there. That's why I zipped over there. You can see those documents. I was sort of trying to be humorous, but obviously unsuccessful with this group. Get 3 people who smiled. Are you all asleep? I'll wear funny clothes. I get my Mickey Mouse ears on. Maybe that will work. Anything. Please. Take my students. Please. So I just wanted to show you where that stuff is. So voila, we will go there. The chemical basis of life. This is basic biochemistry. There is another outline in there. It's not necessarily from this textbook, but it's a lot of the stuff you cover. There's a reason those printed materials are there. Use them, review them, test questions come from them. A word to the wise is sufficient. People ask me, what's going to be on the test? Is it just this? Is just everything. The question is, it's hard to filter it out. And yes, I'll provide a study guide, but still, it's not like these, and they're not, how do you spell DNA? No, we don't do that stuff anymore. It's the big leagues. So why do we study it? We're made of chemicals, okay? All of these things are chemicals, chemicals. Okay, everything like that. The anatomical, we're made of organic chemicals. We're made of various types of structural material. We have all sorts of chemicals, organic and inorganic, floating around in the milieu of a giant inorganic chemical, small by size, giant by amount, called water, and all the stuff that's in it. Okay, so all of these kinds of things. We have inorganic chemicals, the minerals in our bones, the aforementioned calcium. So a little look back. I know people dread this part. I try to make it easy. The harder part, I think, is what comes when we start talking about the breakdown, when we start talking about amino acids making proteins. Don't cringe. You don't have to memorize all 20 amino acids. You don't have to memorize any names. You don't have to know a valine from a leucine, from a threonine, or even a foranine. There's a threonine, but no foranine. You don't have to do that. You will not have to write down a chemical formula. I promise. I don't want students, because they get very angry and they start throwing stuff. You know where my car is. It's dangerous. Okay, so matter. If it takes up space and has mass, what's the difference between mass and weight? Gravity. So if I would be in outer space and or you would be there, and let's say you weighed 150 pounds, we'll use pounds for fun, let's say 70 kilos, should be 154, okay? And you're up in outer space, you still weigh 154, but there's no way to measure it because you can't get on a scale. When you step on the scale, then the force of gravity is something we can, whether digitally or analog-wise, measure. Okay, that's the difference. So I use the term interchangeably. I'm not going to ask you which is which. So you may have a question about atomic weight. Atomic weight comes basically from the number of protons and neutrons, which are the ones that have weight or mass. Again, I use the term interchangeably, so you know what that definition is. That are there, and we study all of those things. And a big deal when you talk about chemistry are physical versus chemical properties. Sometimes physical properties are important. Most often, our context is usually chemical properties, how they react with one another. But we can't forget its physical properties. A lot of that's where water comes in as well. And so biochemistry is just that. It studies physiological process, not just disease. It really is basically how the body works. It's a biochemical organism. They're doing genetics now. In 2 hours over there, they're going to be doing biochemistry. And they'll talk about a lot of the same stuff. We will just increase in the degree of detail, but they devote a whole term to it. So if we had the periodic table in front of us, we would be able to see these things, okay, that are there, and hopefully we will shortly. So when we're talking about all of these things, the combination, and we'll get to it, of protons, neutrons, and electrons that are there, they make up those atoms. And we have all those atoms we have a group of those atoms, we call that an element. And again, that's the emergent property, the simplest type of matter that has not just chemical, but also physical properties. They should put that down. I mean, if you're talking about carbon, let's say coal or graphite, that has a physical property. What is it? It's solid at room temperature. That's the periodic table. Okay. It tells you whether at room temperature, whether it is liquid, solid, or gaseous. Those are physical properties. I mean, I'll buy it. Look, oxygen. Okay. Helium. Those wonderful balloons for birthdays. Okay. Its most important thing is its physical property. It's lighter than air. Okay, not its chemical properties, because it doesn't react. Remember that ideal gases, Nobel gases, that ring a bell, periodic table, helium, neon, krypton, argon. No? Sure you heard that stuff. Okay? They don't play well with others. Okay? They don't have chemical properties, they have physical properties. So that's, again, PowerPoint style. See, now if they amended and say physical and certain physical and chemical properties, I'll buy that. Naturally occurring is just that in the laboratory, bombarding things with that, they've been able to change things. It's interesting. That's kind of how the periodic table almost developed. Okay, I mean, it was very PBS, or is it Nat Geo? I haven't been able to find it. You probably could find it somewhere on video. Pay for it on Amazon. They did like a 3-part series, like 2 hours for each episode, on how the periodic table came to be. Very interesting. It shows you what I watch. Oh, it does not. Last night, my wife has a Bible study class, and it's me and the dog and the cats at home. I'm watching a repeat of X-Men Apocalypse. So it gives you an idea. I'm more well-rounded than that. So atoms, the smallest particle within an element that are identical in properties to that element. These are important. And this is confusing. So when they talk about, we call them major elements or major components. Your body is made up of, and one of them is incorrect there. Not incorrect entirely. Okay. So our big four, so to speak, of the major elements are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, or nitrogen. Our next two are calcium and phosphorus. Think of, I just told you all about calcium. Our bones have an immense abundance of calcium. If you do this one, that's correct for bacteria. They have more sulfur. So that's the big difference. And they have it there when we begin to see it. So even I would certainly they're bulk elements. We have a name for trace elements. We call them minerals. Look on vitamins. Look on the nutritional information that you see on almost anything you consume. Look on the back of the cereal box. Okay, and that's where you begin to see the idea. And we'll talk about vitamins versus minerals. Minerals are inorganic, even though they may become bonded to organic molecules, where vitamins are organic in nature. They have very, very specific roles in what they do biologically, which people don't necessarily understand. Okay, and that's something that you're going to become familiar with. And you're going to get some of it from me. Do you take nutrition this term? Okay, so you're going to become familiar with that as well. Mostly online, in class. And so I never heard of an ultra trace element. Okay, but I'll buy it. I'm not going to ask you about that. And of course, our old friends, definite charts like this are good. Okay, and you've all had this stuff. This is why that first exam is sort of inherently a little bit more user-friendly, because at least part of it you had to have had before you were sitting here. Okay, so we have, what do you have? An atom, and it's made up of, not all of them, by the way. That's the periodic table, because hydrogen ain't got no neutrons. That's the big deal. Normally. And that's a big deal. So relatively large particles within an atom, about the same weight as a proton, but they don't have any charge. They're electrically neutral. A lot of times we'll see, I don't want to get into subatomic particles more, even like when we start talking about positrons and things like that. I don't want to include that. For instance, a positron is like an electron with a positive charge. Think of a neutron splitting off and basically just as positive charge. We use those scientifically. There's things called PET testing, positron emission testing. And we are able to bond these positrons to glucose and basically put them in intravenously and scan the brain. The brain only runs on glucose. And so, and because of the way the test is done, you'll see different parts of the brain light up. And it's really a very useful test for Alzheimer's, for different things to see what parts of the brains are being utilized or underutilized. And because the more that they light up and change colors, the more active they are. Well, PET testing, or positron emission testing. And we were able to take that molecularly in some way, those positrons. So I don't want to tell you it's not important, but you might come in contact with this. They're there. That's comparatively new. Let's see, the last 25 years. Electrons, everybody knows what they are. They have mass, it's negligible. When we get to the periodic table, we don't count any of the mass or weight of the electrons. You're going to see some irregularities in numbers that I will get to when we start talking about isotopes. That was the hint about neutrons. Because in nature, there are variations all the time. Sometimes they're very significant. Probably the most famous of them that we hear about today is called carbon dating. Carbon's neat, and this is when I do my periodic table thing. You have 6 and 6. Okay, 6 protons, 6 neutrons. Some carbon has an extra neutron or two. We have carbon 13 and carbon 14 that aren't always in nature. The trouble with the carbon 14 is from whatever this planet started with, our world started with, it continues to deteriorate. It is unstable. And because the neutron is effectively, it's a way of radioactively tracing, of tracing and dating something by how much carbon 14 is left. So when you talk about dating something with carbon, you insert it into a chemical formula, and I don't want to conflict with anybody's views. This is not my area of expertise. Okay, it's going to tell you how old a fossilized remain is. Is that from biblical times, or was that something that somebody stuck there 100 years ago? Okay, oh, this is a historic relic. It's ways that you can ascertain that. Now, that's scientifically the way that is done. I'm very careful, not just because these days you have to be so careful with things that you say, but to try. Everybody has different beliefs about things and age. I mean, my wife wasn't at that Bible study class for any other reason other than her faith is very, very strong. Why she married a Jewish doctor, I'll never know. We'll get together. So all of those things, notwithstanding, that's some of the just sort of again, stream of consciousness. What happens a lot? Okay, we rarely see these elements in their native form. Carbon, yeah, because we have coal and graphite. Other than that, most of them don't exist that way. Maybe we'll see iron, but when we use iron biologically, it has lost electrons or gained electrons. That's something you're going to see. We have a fancy name for it. It's called ionization. Typically when you put some of these in water, they immediately ionize. We'll talk about that. So a particle formed from an atom that's electrically charged, gained or lost. And we have to go into things called valence and what that really means. Because all of that is leading to is sort of the base information for you to understand this idea of polar and nonpolar bond. Things that bond covalently and things that really don't bond at all, but we call it an ionic bond. It's a strong magnetic attraction. It's by no means a strong bond. Comparatively speaking, why do we know it's not a strong bond? Because you put that in water, it's salt, sodium chloride. You put it in water, and guess what? You don't see it anymore. That's because it immediately reverts to sodium ions, which are positively charged, and chloride ions, which are negatively charged. And they disappear. Unless you put so much salt in the water, it comes out on the bottom. It's because it's reached what we call its solubility. You can't get any more. We call that a supersaturated solution. Going back to my chemistry roots. If you cook, did you ever put cornstarch slurry in something to tighten something to make it more like a thickening agent for a gravy? You create a slurry. Put a lot of cornstarch in, spoon up, and add that, bring it to a boil, and it'll make the gravy thicken if you want to use it that way. You could use roux, arrowroot. Cooking is important to understand. We're going to learn about emulsions. We're going to learn about things that are basically how things combine in that regard. Learn about that. That's part of this little thing. So I get to use a lot of cooking analogies. And once again, protons, mass and positively charged, electrons, negligible mass, neutrons, particle formed by two or more. We told that molecule. Same versus different. Here's that chart. Notice calcium and phosphorus. That's correct. And then these are still, you see, these are about 96% are those first four. If you add it up and do the math, we get to about 96% for CHON. And after that, now nearly 100% potassium, sulfur, chlorine, sodium, magnesium. And then everything else to me is a trace element, as you can see it here. Trace means just that, a smidge. Tiny smidge of iodine so your thyroid can function. Comparatively tiny smidge of iron is all that's really needed to make your hemoglobin. Okay, and all of these play important roles. So here we have the definitions that are there. Charge, carry a single positive, no electrical charge. We know about the protons and neutrons in the nucleus, and voila, that takes us to our first structure. And we will, and I'll conclude it this way, as I have a minute or so to tell you. That's lithium. Okay. You get the periodic table, you're going to see that it loses that electron, just disappears. Because there's supposed to be 8. Remember that whole thing, the octet rule, ringing a bell? If not, we'll go over it. That are there. I love this. Chemistry major. But you'll see that. Where do we use lithium? Lithium with a positive charge. Lithium, and it's still utilized, although it has a lot of side effects. Lithium chloride was one of the original agents used to treat bipolar disorder. And some bipolar disorders it is still used. It isn't all those, what we call the SSRIs, selective serotonin, the Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft family, who knows what they are today. Okay, now lithium is still utilized. The problem is it has a fair amount of toxicity, and you have to monitor levels very closely. I'll leave you with that. Clinical nugget. Have a great weekend. See you all Wednesday. Nice chatting. Stop.